Ray, tell us a bit about your book, Unanswered Questions about 9/11. It's not a book about like grieving. It's a book that's exploring some different stuff.
It's a book about an umbrella group called the Family Steering Committee for the 9/11 Independent Commission, representing the many hundreds, even thousands of families that wanted to have an investigation, that decided after the funerals were over that they would go to Washington, D.C. and speak to all the members of the Senate and Congress and to members of the Bush administration and ask for an investigation to make the nation safe. The Family Steering Committee was made up of more people that voted for the Bush-Cheney ticket in 2000. So this was not a group of radical Democrats that had something in for the Bush administration and presidency. And it's a story of the obstacles, the many obstacles that they encountered, expecting a transparent investigation. And it's also a story that I stumbled upon, having listened to the news, you know, from day to day or week to week, missing some broadcasts, certainly. But I went 6 years without ever finding out that there was any investigation that the families had anything to do with, and knew little about the 9/11 Commission itself. So it's a story that's also been ignored generally for the last 2 decades, and an important piece to understand living in a post 9/11 world. So the families, like people like Patty Casaza, whose husband John died in the North Tower, was a nursing student. Mary Fetchett, whose son Brad died in the South Tower, has said she wasn't involved in politics really at all. So of the dozen people on the Family Steering Committee umbrella group representing all the families, I don't think that all 12 of them even voted in the year 2000. So simply the catalyst of the common experience of having a death of a family member caused them to want to make a change and find out whatever the lessons were to learn. And so they went to Washington, D.C., and they met with stiff resistance from the Bush administration. Said we don't have any money to spend on this. Even though nearly $80 million was spent investigating Monica Lewinsky and other Clinton scandals in the 1990s. And when they brought their questions, the 9/11 commissioners said in March of 2003, before the press, the cameras rolling, "Thank you, families, for these excellent questions, and many hundreds of questions. These will be, quote, a roadmap for how to do our inquiry." So you have this public deference and appreciation. And then in private, the commission rolls along. You have people like Lee Hamilton, who's co-chairing, who doesn't want any public hearings at all, doesn't want to have anyone swear under oath, doesn't want to have any subpoenas. And so there's, and in private, the 9/11 Commission, as they deal with the questions, only addresses 9% of the questions and leaves the vast majority unanswered, or the ones, or some more superficially addressed, but not satisfactorily. So it is what Laurie Van Auken and Kristen Breitweiser said was really political theater, and the families and the nation deserve more, as does the world.
So what's the impact then on family members who are looking for a thorough investigation and instead get this political theater? Like what happens to family members as they live through this?
Yeah. I mean, like, I'll give you a quote from Laurie Van Auken, whose husband Kenneth died in the North Tower. She said, we always said, if, they're then kind of called conspiracy theorists for asking the question after the 9/11 Commission report is over. During the commission, they're thanked repeatedly for these wonderful questions. And then afterwards, when they say, this wasn't done properly, we need a new investigation, then they start being called conspiracy theorists themselves. And Laurie Van Auken says, "We always said if there are conspiracy theories out there, it's the government's fault, because they did not ever really explain or show or want us to know what happened. We lived it, and nothing really ever made sense, ever. It just wasn't conducted in a way that something should be conducted if you want to get to the bottom of something, to learn what happened." You've got family members expecting urgent questions that are going to be asked of people who are witnesses that each commissioner has 5 minutes to ask the most important question. And what you have happening sometimes is commissioners flattering the witnesses, saying, "That's a great suit you're wearing," or, my family came from Iowa, little asides and joking, and it's just frustrating for the families to have, Donald Rumsfeld is asked if he, ordered jets to be scrambled to defend the Pentagon, and he looks around and says, "Did I order jets to be scrambled to defend the Pentagon?" And then Tom Keene bangs the gavel and says, "Next question, time's up." So, what people expect. But if we don't know that this is going on, and if we just read a report in the New York Times or the Toronto Star or the Winnipeg Free Press, we don't know all this stuff that's going on in the background, which really is not the way an investigation is supposed to go. And so there have been a number of different efforts over the succeeding 15 years for new investigations. Almost all of them, hardly reported at all. You just find it, an article in the Village Voice or something. But outside of local papers and local radio stations covering this in New York City, you'd never know.
Yeah, so the families actually had really specific questions that they needed answers to. We're told, "Oh, these are great questions." Well, like you said, the phrase uses a roadmap, and then 10% of the only, or not even 10% of their questions are even addressed in this supposedly thorough investigation.
Yeah. So it's what the families call political theater, and yet you have people have all of this visceral reaction to what's happened on this atrocious day, and you have people who voted for the Bush administration wanting to believe the story the government is telling them. And so but after the whole thing ends with the report's release in the summer of 2004, that creates a real fracture among the family community, because some families say, "I just can't take it. This has not been a proper investigation." While other families are saying, I will believe, or I want to believe that this is good enough. So it ends up creating a fracture across the families, which exists till now. You'll have families that are strongly aligned with the official account, and others that just can't stomach what's happened.
So this group of people who came together to seek answers ends up broken apart by the results of the investigation.
Yeah.
You used the phrase conspiracy theory, and I think, that is so prevalent in our current context, this rise of conspiracy theories. Do you have thoughts about how even that phrase, or what we mean by conspiracy theories, has changed in this post 9/11 world from how it might have been used or to describe things then, and how it is being used now, or what we mean when we say conspiracy theories?
Yeah, the phrase originally comes out of, I think, the American legal system in the 1880s or 1890s, which simply was describing how police were trying to determine how a crime was committed. And they would have a number of different hunches, like Sherlock Holmes or Agatha Christie, on how this crime might have been committed. So we say, well, here's plan A and here's plan B for how the criminals might have done this crime. And they would call them conspiracy theories, which was a neutral term and reported so by the press for many decades. And it was only in 1967 when the Central Intelligence Agency was worried about the numerous books coming out questioning the Warren Commission report on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, that the CIA decided to really weaponize the phrase and dismiss any questions about the Warren Commission by calling people conspiracy theorists. And if you look at LexisNexis search, you will see how that term has really skyrocketed, especially since September 11th in the usage. Used to have, maybe a few dozen references a year in any paper across the USA in the 1970s, 80s, 90s. And then all of a sudden you've got, you can hear that phrase being used, thousands of times a year by reporters on radio, TV, and the newspaper. And so it just becomes a thing that we know automatically. It's kind of like when I was in grade 3 and kids in my school would say during recess, your epidermis is showing. And I was really embarrassed because I didn't know that epidermis was a fancy word for skin. But it is kind of like that, and we hear these, people call people names to stop the conversation. Bra burning feminist, bleeding heart liberal, whatever it happens to be. And then suddenly people don't know what to do with that insult or jeer. And so, this is so important. The families would want us to move beyond our discomfort with somebody calling us names and get down to for the sake of history, to really discussing, what happened, because our whole world has changed since September 11th.
So would you say then that in some circumstances, using the phrase conspiracy theory or calling someone a conspiracy theorist is a way of deflecting their questions or discrediting them?
It is, especially since in the 9/11 Commission itself, the word plot is used numerously. And Bob Kerrey, who's a 9/11 commissioner, says that the 9/11 Commission offered up a conspiracy theory, an official account, where two or more were gathered together to do something nefarious. Nobody's suggesting that one person acted alone. So when you have two or more people acting to do something criminal, it is by definition a conspiracy. And it's simply a matter of then deciding who has the best evidence to show what conspiracy will stand up in court. But then again, the events of September 11th had never gone to court. The families were not allowed to take it to court. They were given payouts to honor the deaths of their loved ones on the condition that they would never sue the government. And so that's where we're at.
So, I mean, evidence is obviously something we would want to see used in trying to prove something legally in a court case. But where did you see evidence being used or misused or not used as you went through the process of researching this book?
So,
like, was there a lot of evidence-based findings going on, or?
Yeah, there's a lot to find. And I'll just give you one example. I mean, on September 11th, I was in Joshua Tree National Park in southeastern California, and I had to cancel my flight because nobody could fly in domestic US airspace. And I didn't get 5 days later, I got home. Including the families couldn't fly anywhere to get back to, start making preparations for funerals. The exception was members and relatives of the bin Laden family, the prime suspect accused by the Bush administration. And Richard Clarke testified to the 9/11 Commission about this question, about why were the families of bin Laden allowed to fly. Wouldn't you want to ask them some questions, not because they're guilty of anything, but just, do they know anything? Because there's all kinds of stories in the news about more terrorist attacks coming all the way through the fall. And Richard Clarke said, well, somebody told us, that we should, send them on planes and get them out of here. So we did that. And then he was followed up a couple months after he testified before the 9/11 Commission. A reporter from the Hill newspaper in Washington, D.C. So, well, who was it that told you to that this would be a good idea? And he said, well, actually, it was me. So the, I mean, if you're listening to some court proceedings and somebody told me, 99% of the chance you're going to think somebody else told me, not I told myself. So this is the kind of thing that happens in the life of the 9/11 Commission in terms of evidence and in terms of integrity of testimony. Condoleezza Rice says, nobody could have known that anyone would use planes for missiles. And yet you have numerous war games with the Pentagon and the US Air Force where they practice to defend the nation. And you have 3 or 4 of these in this as far back as 2000 that have planes flying around World Trade Center Twin Tower graphics with the face of Osama bin Laden. So the families are saying, well, did you suspect something back in June of 2000? It's just, I mean, the families didn't ask questions to be rhetorical or to accuse anyone. And they never said, the Family Steering Committee never said, we think the following people in the Bush administration are complicit, but they said, we need you to answer these questions. And then the decision to not answer the vast majority left the families with even more disturbing questions about what that omission adds up to.
So, what do you think the long-term impact has been on public trust or credibility or the way that we disagree with one another in like broad scale public policy or politics?
I think that the way that the 9/11 Commission has been handled by the press since it's come out, with the exception of, at the time, MSNBC had a very tough critique. Harper's Magazine, there were a number of them. But as the years have gone by, you'll find even MSNBC changed their tune, and you have them all singing on the same song sheet now. That the 9/11 Commission report was just fabulous, and there's no doubt about how definitive it is. And yet there are so many problems with the way that it was addressed. Even the way it was handled from the start, they had a whole outline determining what the chapter headings and subheadings would be. And usually what you want to do is go and find the evidence. But what they did was they sort of determined what the story would be before they went and wrote the report. And so this kind of thing undermines confidence on the part of those who are closest to the story. But the further away you are from the story, if your local radio station or TV or newspaper hasn't reported these kind of details, you would think that this is a great story and that there's nothing to see here. If we didn't have reporters reporting about the trail of the Highway of Tears in British Columbia and just talked about what a great Highway 16 it is, you would never know that there was anything going on with Indigenous women hitchhiking. There's a way in which you can tell a story and it can just go away. I knew a lot about Vietnam in the 1960s, but I had to read a book in the last 10 years about the Jakarta method to learn that 750,000 people died in Indonesia in the 1960s in a CIA-backed coup. So there are stories that we often don't know, and we trust that the media will tell us the most important stories, but often people sometimes that are concerned with network ratings or even advertising dollars make decisions to make a certain story not go to air.
So we've got not just in the story you're telling in the book, but continuing problems around what stories are getting told, what evidence is backing up the stories or not, and how we engage with, I think, competent scholarship. You said, like, I had to go find the book to read.
Yeah. And so often, and we all don't have time. I mean, we can't all have a long suit in Israel, Palestine, First Nations, gambling, drug addiction. There's so many issues, and I understand, and so, but we do need to trust that reporters and with the concentration in the media, there's so much fewer media outlets that are not there's lots of problems with the lack of independent voices today than there were even 20 years ago.
Yeah. Just before Dawn left, she said reading, oh, my apologies. Dawn said that she really recommends reading the book with other people because she found it to be a bit of a challenging read. And but I believe you actually have a study guide coming out, Ray, so that we can read it with other people. Is that right?
That's right. I am determined to finish it this week in the next few days. And I could maybe even, like, it's just gonna be like a free document that's meant for a person to lead a congregational group or any kind of a mix of people. And I could send that document to you, Michelle, and then it can be perhaps posted beside the posting of this interview, CCS Friday today, and then people can just simply print off the document, because it's designed as an 8-session guide. And Don Rolke, together with Marion Best, Barb Myers, CCS graduate, Carrie Waylander, and Juanita Austin in British Columbia, and then Scott Slaba in Bellingham, Washington. So four Canadians and 2 people, American citizens by birth. So, and they went through the whole book in a PDF advanced reader copy, and helped me to draft material. So I'm finishing up the final session this weekend.
Yeah, so we can definitely include that. We'll have a follow-up email with that resource, or instructions on how to get it. And just to make sure that we know, you said it was a boutique publisher, but where do we get your book, Ray?
Okay, you can order the book through McNally Robinson in the prairies. You can order it through Amazon if you want an ebook. Amazon also has the paperback, but any local bookstore can get, as Rob is showing you down there, you can get the paperback or hardcover copy. It's 454 pages, so it's worth it. Yeah, so and I think that I've been in touch with numbers of family members who've read the book now and find it quote excellent, or they think it distinguishes itself from the numbers of books that are out there with a very unique and important angle. And I think also with the book, it's because I've been teaching so many writing workshops the last 2 decades. I wanted to write a book that the people in my memoir, journal writing, poetry workshops could read, and not find it too stiff a climb. So it's not. So even though there is some complicated material I have to deal with at points, describing where radar comes from and things like that, I have enough layering of personal narrative of different families' voices and first responders' voices, so that kind of carries the chapters, and so people are telling me it's more of a page turner. Plus, you'll love the font, which is which I spent great care to make sure it was about 275 words on each page. So it's not like some books that are about history where you have nearly 400 words a page, and you feel like I'm trying to get 9 more pages done, but it takes you 3 hours to get there. So you'll feel the small victory that the reader feels when they read a page and they've got 1 less page to read before they get to the end of the chapter. Yeah.
So I'm hearing it's a page turner, is it, Ray?
It's a page turner. Yeah.
Ray, I just can't thank you enough for making the time to spend an hour with us, talking about your book and what you learned, and what these unanswered questions are, and what the impact is of having them still unanswered. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's been a great pleasure, and I'm delighted that there are people who are interested in learning about this story, and I think that often there are things that we don't know in the current environment that we're in, that we only find out about years later, and this is probably one of them. And so, in order to understand, we're following a Savior who says the truth will set you free, and so it's important that we're able to discern what is trustworthy and what is not.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. So that's a great task for us to take into the rest of our day and our weekend. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. Again, if you would like to support the work of the center, you can do so through donations, or we